Today the sun can't decide if it wants to stay behind a cloud or not, so the lighting's gonna be a bit inconsistent. Look at that. Wow. Last week was the Biannual Bibliothon. I love this readathon and I participated in a couple of bits and pieces. I'll link a playlist at the end if I remember. I'll try and do that. I thought I'd start off this wrap up by telling you my total page count. This is usually the thing that people wait to the end to keep you like hooked, to keep you like on the edge of your seat, but as a token of good faith on my part, I thought I'd tell you now. 1,176. Not my best, but not my worst either. I can't actually confirm that because I didn't check, but I'm pretty sure it's not the worst I've ever done. I read a lot of short stories and like a decent amount of novels, so I'm going to get into talking about what I thought of the books that I read. First book that I finished, I didn't start in the readathon, but I read most of it in the readathon, and that is The Warrior by Cinda Williams-Chima, which is the first book in a series that focuses on a young boy who has these magical abilities and he doesn't know about them until one day there's like an accident, he forgets to take his medicine, and he suddenly has all these powers that he didn't know he had. It wasn't a bad book, but I don't think I'll be finishing this series. This is one of the books that's been on my shelves for so long and I've just kind of lost interest, and even midway through the book I knew that my interest hadn't really been rekindled in this story or in this plot, and I just felt like maybe I'm in the wrong age bracket to appreciate it, or I don't know, but I wasn't crazy about it. So that's unfortunate, but that's how it goes sometimes with books. This was the first book that I finished. I forget how many pages of it I read, but finished it during the readathon. Second thing I read was actually a novella, and that is Morgan by Mary E. Pearson. I listened to this as an audiobook and it was pretty short. This is a novella that goes with the Remnant Chronicles. This was quite a good short story. It's been a while since I read the Remnant Chronicles, so I didn't have high expectations for this story, but I was pleasantly surprised. I actually can't remember whereabouts this particular story fits into the overarching plot of the trilogy, but it feels like it's probably a prequel. It's told from two perspectives, a boy and a girl. The girl, Morgan, is part of a peaceful tribe, and the boy, whose name escapes me, is part of a scavenging tribe who frequently torments the girl's peaceful tribe and other tribes in that area. And a story about how they connect and what happens. And there was quite a lot in it for how short it was. I really enjoyed that short story. Thought it was pretty great. The next thing I read was Mary Lou's Batman, the next in the DC Icons series. It's kind of like a prequel Bruce Wayne kind of story. It is a story of a young Bruce Wayne who turns 18 and has a birthday party where he doesn't exactly obey all the laws, and he ends up having to do some community service in Arkham Asylum, which is where the criminally insane are kept. And it's a story about Bruce Wayne and his time in Arkham Asylum. In my head, even though the plot doesn't resemble the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, which I know I keep bringing it back to, but I couldn't help but compare the character that you see here and the character that I'm familiar with. I couldn't help but compare. And while that isn't a fault of the books or the writing, it's just something that happens when you read such a familiar character, and a character that's been done and redone so often. But it was a very enjoyable story. The pace was pretty good. It kept it up and kept me interested throughout the whole story, even though it's very short. It was interesting to see the usual type of Batman villains, where it's less about superpowers and more about moral decisions, and that was really interesting to see in a young adult novel. Anywho, quite an enjoyable book. I did like it. I don't know, there's something that keeps me from saying it was amazing, but it was a really good book. The next three things I read were short stories, novellas from the Monument 14 series by e.m.m.a.f.a.g.a.n. This is a series I read years ago. I think it may have been before I started book 2, but I'm not sure. It's a dystopian novel where some chemicals are released from a factory up into the air, and people with different blood types react differently to these chemicals. Some become really violent and some become really sick, and there's some other effects too. And it's basically about these teenagers who get stuck in a mall or a shopping center and what they have to do to survive there. These short stories take place before, during, and later in the series. It's not after, but it's like later in the series. And the names of these short stories are Dress Your Marines in White, Jake and the Other Girl, and What Mario Sciatto Said. What I liked about these short stories is that each one had a different voice and a different tone, but still felt connected to the main story. The first one started a little slow, which I found annoying as the story was only like 30 pages long, but once it got going, it was really interesting. The second one, there were a couple of issues I had with it, particularly in the way that the main character treated one of the other characters, but as a story by itself, ignoring the problems that I had, I'm trying really hard not to spoil you, but as a story, if you disregard those issues, it was quite interesting. The last one definitely had the most unique voice, which took me a while to get used to, but I did like it in the end. That's a really brief, vague description of those stories, but they ranged from 26 to 32 pages long, and they were just kind of brief snippets into that world. There's one other short story in this world, but I cannot find it anywhere. I cannot access it anywhere, and it's quite frustrating. It's only 5 pages long, but it feels like I just haven't finished the series yet, and it's so annoying to just have that little bit that I cannot get. The next thing that I read was The Carnelian Crow by Colleen Gleason. This is the 4th book in the Stoker and Holmes series. It's a steampunk series about Bram Stoker's sister and Sherlock Holmes' niece. Together they fight vampires and crime, and it's very fun and lighthearted and a very easy read. What I like about this series is it's so easy to fall back into. Characters definitely have their own distinct personalities and they're both very different, and the story is just so fun and light and exciting, and I quite like it. The last book, I think there's only one more book and it's coming out this year, so I'm quite excited about that. I really enjoyed this one. I recommend the series if you're looking just for something fun. The next thing I read was another novella, and this was The Proposal by Meg Cabot, which is part of the Mediator series. If you're like me and you read the Mediator series about 4 or 5 times when you were younger, you'll be really excited about this. This story came out, I think, 2 years ago, when this novella and another novel were added to the series, which follows Sue Simon, the ghost mediator, and her boyfriend Jesse as they progress after the events of the last book in the series. And I read the novella during the readathon, and I really enjoyed it. These stories usually revolve around some supernatural activity that Suze has to go and figure out or fight off or something, and that's kind of what this little novella was like too. And it was very light and fun and cute, and I'll say this, it was a little convenient at times, but thinking back on the older books, they probably were pretty convenient too. I liked how easy it was to get back into the story and into the world. Now that might have been because I read it so much when I was younger, but it was a really fun short story that I liked quite a lot. And I'm excited to read the next novel in this series, which I got on my Kindle, so I'll get onto that soon. The next thing I started but didn't yet finish was Gates of Thread and Stone by Laurie M. Lee. This is a dystopian book I've had on my shelves for years, and I finally got to it. I really like the cover and the concept of this story. It's about a girl who lives in this like dystopian world. She doesn't live the best life or with the best circumstances. She has no memories from before she was 8 years old, and her older brother, who's not biologically her older brother, has been looking out for her since he found her wandering around the streets when she was 8. One day her older brother goes missing, and she will do anything to find him. So far it's been a really enjoyable story, really easy to read, but it's dystopian. It follows the familiar patterns and the familiar tropes, and everything is just very expected. There's nothing really that has surprised me so far, nothing even that's particularly stood out so far, but it is an enjoyable book. So I think the only problem that I'm having with it is the fact that I'm kind of over the dystopian genre. And there you have the books that I read during the Biannual Bibliothon. These novels, the novellas that I mentioned and may or may not edit in here, just, you know, so you can have a little catch up and a reminder. Let me know if you participated and if any of the books you read last week were particularly good. And that's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.